So you are giving a talk tomorrow from 7 to 8:30 at the Seamen's Church Institute, and you're talking about a couple things there. You're talking about tools within the community that the community can use to measure certain things, rising sea levels, and we're going to get with that and talk just kind of about how the community can take certain action and be aware of things. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at the Coastal Center and talk about Rhode Island Sea Grant. So just kind of tell me about what you do.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm housed down at the Bay campus at the Graduate School of Oceanography, and the Coastal Resources Center and Rhode Island Sea Grant both are housed down there, and we work together. So I kind of serve, I have both hats on all the time. And we bring the best available science of the University of Rhode Island to the different stakeholders in cities and towns across our coastal communities. And also we're a liaison between the towns and our state agencies who are interested in coastal issues. So that's really our primary purpose, and we focus on everything from what's called marine spatial planning, which the offshore wind farms that we now have in off Block Island. That was part of one of our projects that we worked on with the Coastal Resources Management Council. We work on aquaculture projects, so farming for oysters and mussels and coal hogs, and trying to work with fishermen, commercial fishermen. And the work that I do is all focused on coastal community resilience to keep our coastal communities safe, prepare for future conditions, and also make sure that our coastal economy is viable into the future, because we rely on our tourism economy, our ports, our defense industry, and of course our commercial fishing and aquaculture operations, and we need a healthy coastline to sustain all of that.
Well, and let's talk about that right there, because if you think about it, making sure our economy is viable, coastal economy, and you mentioned defense too, so if we think about it, Newport,
right,
huge. If we think about Musquamaket in the summertime, huge. Westerly and North Kingstown and Quonset. So those are just a few communities on the coast, not mentioning all the rest of them, that have huge impacts if something happens, if there's a storm or if there's flooding, anything like that. So is there a concern that we should have in Rhode Island?
Yes. We were already seeing about 10 inches of sea level rise since 1930, and there is a tide gauge by the Naval Station Newport, and that's been keeping records since 1930. So we have actual data showing that the seas have already risen up 9 to 10 inches since 1930. And based on the projections that we pull in from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who have all the scientists out in the field, out in the ocean, collecting the best available data, they've made predictions about how fast and when the sea levels are likely to rise. And our Coastal Resources Management Council, which regulates our coastal environment in the state, they've adopted the NOAA predictions to help manage the coastline for the future. So we're looking right now at 1 foot of sea level rise by 2035.
That's near future. I mean, if you think about it, we can all think about 2035.
And we're also seeing those sea levels now when we have what's called a moon tide, or the slang is moon tide, or an astronomical high tide. Some call it a king tide or a spring tide. We're already seeing those sea levels on our coastline. So when those tides are extreme and a little bit higher than normal, 4 or 5 times a year, we need to start planning for that, and also for a little bit higher than that, within the period of like a 30-year mortgage. If we go out to if you buy your house now in 2047, that's about mid-century. So we're looking at 2 to 3 feet of sea level rise by then.
2 to 3 feet.
Yes.
Okay, so, and we're seeing this already within those high tides that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and Tony around the corner, we were just talking about this. When do we see these high tides? I mean, I go down to India Point Park sometimes, and that's pretty well inland if you think about, but within the bay.
Sure.
And you see these high tides, and the water comes all the way up into the park, over the barriers, into the grass.
Right.
When there's high tide. But you were mentioning some points down in Wickford, in Wakefield, Oakland Beach. You're seeing these high tides.
Right, and actually in the Oakland Beach example, it comes up through the storm drain in that parking lot down by the jetty or by the big seawall revetment down at the end of Oakland Beach. One of the scientists took a manometer out there and actually measured the salt content of the water, and it's all seawater, and it's coming into the storm drains. We're also seeing that in Newport, in the Point neighborhood. Seawater is coming up through the storm drains when the tides are really high. So if we get a rain event on top of the high tide, the water has nowhere to go. So it just sits in the neighborhood until the tide goes out and the water is able to flush. So keeping those important. We also see, like in Wickford and Watch Hill, These high tides are flooding the parking lots right on the water in those areas. So it's seeing on a regular basis, and the businesses and residents in those areas be better prepared long term.
Yeah, I mean, and you think long term, well, you put it in great perspective, a mortgage.
Yeah.
You put that's a really good perspective. I'm thinking, 20, 30 years out, it may not sound like too long of a time, but putting it in perspective of a mortgage, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You have a stick for us. I don't know what this is for, really, but being able to explain it, this can help.
All right, this is our sea level stick.
Over a little
okay,
bit.
I'll make it here. So this is a sea level stick that we use to illustrate what the levels might look like in the future. So if you hold this stick right next to the water's edge, let's say at a slack tide, or maybe between the high and low tide every day, and we look at how high will the water rise in the future.
Okay.
So I have years painted on this side that corresponds with the levels that our CRMC are planning for in the future. So, and this is broken up. This is a 6 foot tall stick broken up into 1 foot increments. So based on the projections that the state has adopted, let's just use this one. This is 4 feet 10 inches. This is 2085. So we've rounded it up, saying about 5 feet of sea level rise by 2085. And we're looking at about 6.5 feet by 2100. And NOAA actually just revised those estimates, and now we're looking at almost 9 feet by 2100 because the science keeps coming in, and we're updating this as we. So I need to make a new stick.
We need a bigger stick. We need a bigger stick. So this is where this sea level.
Right.
So let's say
2015 when I made this thing.
Yeah. So this will be here.
Yeah, by 2085. So 2050 is down here. So it's just about 1 foot 9 inches by 2050. But if we get a storm on top of that, and we are seeing those high tides at this level currently.
Yeah.
If we get a storm like a 1954 Hurricane Carol. We'll see. I did a quick estimate of this neighborhood. 12 feet of water in the streets where we're standing.
In downtown
City Providence, yeah.
In downtown Providence. I'm just going to set this over
Yep,
there
that's
so we
cool.
don't have to hang on to it
Great.
this whole time.
Yeah.
And so that could be worrisome. I mean, I don't have a home on the water. I'm not fortunate enough to have that. But there are people who live in coastal communities who have beach houses. There are restaurants. I mean, our state relies on the 400 plus miles of coastline here.
Right.
So what do we do?
What do we do? The tools that are under development now, the state's been really trying to provide what we call decision support tools in the biz, to help visualize what this will look like across our landscape under different storm scenarios and also different sea level scenarios. And we want, first of all, the people to be aware of what the possibilities are, and then figure out what level of risk are they willing to accept. So if I'm a business owner, and I know that I might have flooding from a storm, what kinds of short-term and long-term things do I need to think about? Some of the techniques for businesses, like for Newport Harbor, for example, there are some simple things like strapping down some HVAC or heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems that are on the rooftops of some of the buildings in the waterfront. How can you strap those down so they don't blow off in a storm event? Bowen's Wharf, I think, took some action to replace the floors in some of the businesses there. So they are designed to flood and minimize mold and mildew after the floodwaters receive. There's also a program that we're looking at called Fortified, which is kind of similar to the green building LEED certification, where your building is certified to be environmentally sound and sustainable. The Fortified program allows a business owner or builders to build to a standard that is more storm resistant and might be more marketable to people who are looking to buy houses on the coastline. And then, of course, if you live in a flood-prone area or a projected flood-prone area, you can consider elevating your property, or otherwise just trying to flood-proof and minimize entrance of floodwater into your basement. You can move the mechanicals, your furnace and boiler and electrical stuff to the first floor if your basement floods. So all these techniques that we're trying to pull together as a resource for our municipal governments and for business and homeowners.
And you have developed, you along with several others, have developed which we have a picture. I don't know
cool.
how to get it to stop on that,
Okay.
but a picture of on the website storm tools, so people can actually go in and find out if they're at risk, to see if they're at risk from sea level rise, coastal erosion, or this storm surge. And it's really neat. You can really, I did it, and I was
cool.
like, plug in your address and you can see. So how does that work? How does storm tools work?
Storm Tools is, like you said, an online mapper that we've designed to be available to all Rhode Islanders 24/7. There's no cost. It's going to be available in perpetuity, we hope, for all Rhode Islanders. And like you said, you can enter your address and you can click on and off different questions to assess whether your property is likely to have seawater on it in the future from sea level rise scenarios in the future. And also if we get hit by a big storm, for the Storm Tools for Beginners that you're seeing behind me is a 100-year storm, which is about a Hurricane Carol from 1954. So we've seen that water level in the past. And what we did was we added that 2 foot of sea level rise scenario on that layer to simulate if we got a Carol at an astronomical high tide.
Oh,
That's what the water level is like. So when you see this flashing behind us, that's showing about 12.5 feet of water in downstate Providence along, I think I did the Superman building, the 111 Westminster.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so you've said that that cities, municipalities are looking at this to find out what to do with roads, how to deal with fire stations and things like that.
Right. Yeah, there are a couple of fire stations. There's in Newport, there's one in Warwick that we've been able to show the towns that if you have a storm event similar to a Hurricane Carol, you may have areas of your town that are cut off from that fire station. So working with the emergency management professionals, how can we place or stage equipment ahead of time into those neighborhoods that might be cut off from emergency service vehicles? And then also what kinds of evacuation policies are already in play that maybe we